What's up? Welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of House of the Dragon Season 2 from HBO. The first Game of Thrones prequel is back after 2 years with its second season. And man, it's good to be back. I loved House of the Dragon Season 1, and I'm very excited for where Season 2 will take us. I think what's most exciting about House of the Dragon Season 2 is that we are really starting to cook with gas when it comes to this storytelling. The Dance with Dragons made so much sense as the first Game of Thrones spin-off, and we've really progressed beyond a lot of the necessary table setting that took place in House of the Dragon Season 1. And now we're really settling into characters, settling into actors. The time skips have passed. And now I think we're really going to start getting payoff and the big wow moments that you come to expect with Game of Thrones. And I think these first 2 episodes in particular, the iconic blood and cheese moment, twin duel in episode 2, the ongoing conflict between Green and Black and the powder keg about to explode. It's all very exciting to me, and I think the acting performances, the strength of the screenplays, the production design, CGI quality, it's all in line with what you expect from Game of Thrones. So I am really over the moon and so excited that this show is back, and I really can't wait for Season 2 to continue. As someone who's familiar with where the story will go from Fire and Blood and the Song of Ice and Fire World book, it's fun to kind of predict to myself, I'm not going to spoil, predict to myself like where the season will go, what key moments will happen in what season. Ultimately, though, the reason why book fans and Westeros hardos like myself are so enthusiastic about this being the first Game of Thrones spinoff is because there's just a lot of pulpy stuff to come with this story. I think it's very ripe and perhaps a bit safe, in terms of adapting Game of Thrones. Maybe there'll be something familiar, but ultimately I think that palace intrigue, the battle of succession, that is a really core element to why people like Game of Thrones. And that will come in spades. We're already getting it, with House of the Dragon. It's also really cool that Fire and Blood is not a traditional novel from George R. R. Martin. It's told with unreliable narrators and multiple perspectives and POVs and whatnot. So the showrunners, Ryan Condal and everyone involved creatively, they have freedom to take and change things to make the best possible show because the source material leaves things ambiguous and open-ended at times. And I think that's very helpful to making a show without being a slave to the source material, so to speak. Now, there was some criticism from some corners about the blood and cheese changes at the end of the first episode, in terms of, frankly, being even more brutal and more harrowing for Helena on the page. I think what you got was still pretty effective, pretty strong. Episode 1 also gives some, I think, really enjoyable fan service, quite smart in my opinion, of seeing Jace go to the wall, treat with Cregan Stark, basically just a cameo to see Winterfell briefly, see the wall in motion, and I think it's just kind of a fun return, and a solid scene for Jace in terms of finding out what happened to his brother, of course, at the end of Season 1. I really do think a lot of the table setting from House of the Dragon Season 1 was important for the world building, even if ultimately the show is now making the show it wanted to make. That 6-episode prologue, I found it effective. That's where you get a lot of the Viserys stuff, of course. It's important to the story. And Millie Alcock, of course, as young Rhaenyra, a huge breakout from Season 1. But now we're really in the thick of things. I think we're going to settle into Emma Darcy's Rhaenyra, Olivia Cook's Alicent, Matt Smith's Daemon, etc. Fabian Frankel's Kristen Cole, right? Aemond and Aegon, right? Otto Hightower, Rhys killing it, right? The characters are starting to be established, and I think what's fun about Season 2 is, and perhaps this is a sticking point to some, but I find the gray very intriguing, is that we don't have a traditional POV character, lead protagonist in House of the Dragon thus far, to the degree we did with Game of Thrones anyway. Game of Thrones gave us Jon Snow and Robb Stark, and briefly Ned Stark, and of course Daenerys Targaryen, right? Clear, heroic people, clear people to root for when watching the show. With House of the Dragon, I think most people are rooting for Rhaenyra and Rhaenyra's cause, but there's still some unlikability across the board. So we'll see how that continues. I think keeping Daemon as a kind of like Jaime Lannister mold, I think is pretty important for this show in terms of having people have things to root for, because ultimately even though as much as I love Olivia Cook, been a huge fan of hers since Thoroughbreds a while ago now, no one's really rooting for the Hightowers, right? Like, it's on site for Kristen Cole at this point. It's on site for Aemond, who is a very striking villainous figure, really cool. Obviously, Aegon is a dipshit king who we've come to know, right? He's got some Joffrey in him. He's also got some Tommen in him, right? In terms of his incompetence and his cruelty. So the familiarity is welcome to me, but also I think the ambiguity is a bit stronger and grayer than we've gotten with the core Game of Thrones story. And I like that. Going through the 2 episodes real quick, I mentioned the wall scene. I love the stuff with Rhaenyra grieving at Storm's End, waiting for proof of, Luke's death and whatnot, finding the dragon wing. Blood and Cheese, I think, was really strong, ultimately, even if it was pretty expected. I think Larys plotting against Otto, Larys's strength as, again, a Varys figure for sure in terms of familiarity, but Larys's strength as a figure being established pretty well. One of the best elements of Game of Thrones has, maybe it's a meme at this point, but people talking in rooms, right? I think you got a lot of that to great effect at the start of House of the Dragon season 2. The Alicent Otto convo about kind of managing and influencing their sons and controlling them, I thought was really cool. I love the White Worm coming back into play. So Sonia Mizuno, captured by Daemon, then they use her influence and her knowledge, of course, to pull off Blood and Cheese. I kind of like the duel scene with the burial at Dragonstone and Alicent in the Sept at the same time, really trying to establish and hit home that these people don't really want the bloodshed that is forthcoming. I love the scene of Aemond and Cole warmongering, and Aemond already being distrustful of his mother, and Otto then coming in and really big dicking both of them, particularly Aemond, in terms of calling them dumb. Aegon, it's kind of nice to have his lads, his bros, be on the show at least a little bit. Hits home with how he is. Frankly, I thought the Blood and Cheese stuff was still pretty brutal. Like, we hear a hacksaw cutting off young Jaehaerys' head after he's been killed, even if we don't see it. We see it on Helena's face. Now, I guess the criticism would be that we don't have much of a relationship with Helena as a character, let alone, obviously, her young children, who we really have no relationship with at all. So this is not a moment that can hit as hard as some of the iconic, deaths and betrayals and murders of Game of Thrones, because we don't have that relationship yet. But I think what's to come in the storytelling will hit harder and harder as we spend more time with these characters and things start to settle in. So I don't really have that concern, moving forward. Thinking about episode 2 as well, I liked Otto's funeral scheming, really establishing himself. Again, familiar. He's a Tywin Lannister type character, but I think Rhys Ifans giving a great performance. It's really enjoyable. Cole really establishing himself once again as a hypocrite to the audience, the way he's trying to big dick Eric, even though he's clearly incompetent in his own right, as he's having an affair with Alicent while the heir of the king is murdered. The Aemond scene in the brothel, I think, is pretty interesting, because Aemond, I think, has potential to be a complex character, even if he's quite brutish and quite villainous, in terms of him feeling appreciated and, of course, having the scarred, loss of his eye and how people treat him and whatnot. So I'm keeping my eye on that in terms of fleshing out that character. Seeing all the rat catchers get killed, very striking, and then Otto blowing his top off at Aegon and then being stripped of his Hand of the King status and deciding to flee to Old Town, telling Alicent this. We'll see what happens. Otto is by no means leaving the story. We also get the name drop of Daeron Targaryen, who will be coming into the show very shortly, of course. And then we get that brothers fight, the twins, of course. So I think it was a pretty clever scheme from Cole, all things considered. It actually got pulled off, and they kind of fake you out with Mysaria noticing something being off, but clearly not being able to stop things in time if she even tried. And then you get the successful defense of Rhaenyra, but then the suicide following the killing of one's brother. And again, we don't have a huge relationship with those twins, so it's not going to hit as hard as other big moments, but I think it's still really effective for what it is. And I think the conflict between Daemon and Rhaenyra, in terms of Daemon scheming behind Rhaenyra's back and setting up Blood and Cheese, setting up really Daemon's kind of wild card nature as he goes off basically to war, as he heads off to Harrenhal and whatnot. I think we're just really seeing the board get laid out, and again, that palace intrigue, the battle of succession, the backstabbing, the characters with unclear motivations, the gray of it all. To me, that's Game of Thrones. To me, that's Westeros. That's A Song of Ice and Fire. That's what I want from this kind of stuff. And I think the show looks great. The acting is across the board awesome. The CGI is holding up very well considering how dragon heavy this show has been and will continue to be. So, House of Dragon Season 2, man, I'm really excited. I'm expecting a big Rhaenys season. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I'm into it. Kind of in the bag for it, though, to be honest, as someone who's read the books and whatnot. But to me, it's really kind of giving you what you want. And I think, some people don't have a character they connect to, and I kind of struggle to relate to that because I'm pretty connected to Alicent and Rhaenyra already. I thought the show did a really good job of getting your investment in them. Maybe other characters you're less connected to. Certainly the family tree of both sides of the conflict is still a bit hazy. It's hard to keep track of who is who still to this point, especially when you factor in the Valerian side of things with Rhaenyra's folk. But either way, I think the show's working. I think the show's getting better and better, and the set pieces are coming. We know that. So let me know, how are you feeling about House of Dragon Season 2 thus far? What was your favorite moment of the premiere? And for more TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.